Welcome to the Family Office Sherpa podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Parkin, founder and managing director of Whole Road Investments. The aim of this podcast is to provide practical and implementable advice for those looking to build, manage, or service a family office. This is not, however, investment advice, so please check the disclaimer in the show notes. In this episode, we are asking the question, what are the agents of change for family offices?
This is the Family Office Sherpa.
All right, so what do I mean by agents of change or change agents or whatever you want to call them? And I think, we're obviously seeing a little bit of that at the moment globally. So I thought it might be interesting to sort of go, well, what are the agents of change? What's going to fundamentally affect the family office ecosystem? So really, what factors will cause a family office to move from, or the family office to move from current state to a future state? And if you're not looking to incorporate them, if you're a family office to go, we're not going to do anything, we're just going to stay the status quo, it feels fine. What's going to happen is you're going to be left floundering, to be honest, when the new versions start to pull ahead. And it might sound sort of strange because family offices don't compete with each other necessarily, but they do compete for similar resources, things like staffing, good counterparties, those types of things where, if you're not at a certain level of, I don't know, not necessarily sophistication, but certainly at a level of fun to work in, effective, not a frustrating place to be, easy to understand what your purpose and things like that are, then the others you won't pull ahead with them, right? And staffing will be challenged. And to be honest, returns are going to be challenged, which is what I've seen. So what has to happen first? So the analogy being that the telephone was invented so that skyscrapers could be invented, basically. So without the telephone, and obviously this is back in the day when there were messages and messengers had to run and go up buildings and things like that. And if the buildings were too high, they just wouldn't get there, right? So basically they couldn't get to the top floor. So why is this an important analogy? Because enabling that infrastructure must, precede the ambition. First get the telephone, then you can add some extra floors. Some examples for family offices, right? You've got to do things like you've got to build reporting infrastructure before scaling or increasing the complexity of the portfolio because you need that ability to manage and monitor it. Another one is things like establish good governance before hiring external managers because you need to understand how you're going to monitor them, how they're going to be, how their efficacy is going to be determined, things like that. Another one could be you've got to educate the next generation before delegating control, which we see a lot, right? Another one being you've got to secure your systems before going fully digital, and we're seeing that a little bit now. And those that are not secure but digital, that's when there's some real challenge, obviously, from a cybersecurity point of view. So another one, the last one being design the operating model before hiring specialists. Have a plan before you go out and start hiring people because there might be misalignment. There's all sorts of different challenges there, right? These are all things that need to happen before other developments can happen. Before you start adding stories to your house. The other thing to remember though, and this is really important, so don't mistake size for readiness. That meaning just, capability of the office unlocks the growth and the returns, not just because you've got a certain amount of people or you've got a certain level of assets. Size doesn't dictate sophistication. That's what I'm trying to get to with that one. So why is that? That's all the things that have to happen first. So let's dig into a few of them, right? What are one of the change agents being is technology. It sounds pretty obvious. So where I see that working as a real sort of driver of difference within the office is operational tools that are moving from manual to automated. Basically what they can allow for is improved decision speed, accuracy. A lot of people get really uncomfortable making decisions if they can't see what we've got, what's the how it's going to cascade down from an operational perspective or an investment perspective. So, and also what this does allow officers to do is it allows us to do more with less. If you have improved automation and operating tools, you need less staffing. You need less time to make decisions, time to aggregate data. It's a fast-moving market sometimes, and it doesn't always just stop and wait until you aggregate the data and then make your decision. These are the things that can be, a real agent of change. I'm going to probably keep saying that through the whole thing, but you know what I mean? It allows for that change to happen because technology and operating tools from, getting that manual issue out of the way can be really, really helpful. The other one we're seeing as well is accounting systems must integrate with investment platforms and vice versa to a certain degree. A lot of investment platforms say, no, this is a reporting side, no, we stop here at the investment book or record and everything else is your problem. What we're starting to see a little bit is the accounting and the investment platforms integrating. So you've got this single source of truth. And that's kind of the utopian sort of thing here with reporting and accounting and investments, which is we have one single source of data sets and everything pulls up from that. At the moment, there is different, we have our general ledger, which the software systems are not the same as the investment systems, but we are starting to see that integration. So if you're an office and you're not looking to integrate that, I'm not to say that it has to be perfectly aligned or something like that, but if you have to keep transposing data from accounting and an Excel spreadsheet, then the investment team takes that and then puts it into their reporting system, you're going to get left behind. No one wants to work in that environment where you're continually doing manual inputs and things like that. It's a real pain in the, pardon my French, it's a pain in the ass. Anyway, so that's really important. What that allows you to do too, as the technology continues to improve there, is it allows for reduces the need for a power user or a specialist that is just aligned to that one function. You can get generalists with good supplier management skills or good people management skills where they can actually curate these suppliers to do all this heavy lifting, and you can be really a lot more strategic. A lot less around the busy work of day-to-day manual entry and reconciliation and stuff like that, and really start to go, well, what are we trying to do here? And that's an awesome place to work, right? Which is give all the data's there or reporting's there, I know exactly what we've got. And now we're actually really just going to concentrate on the investment piece or the strategic piece or the PAF or the donor advised fund or whatever it ends up being. Right. It's becoming table stakes. I mean, I don't really like that term. I've never really understood it, but it has become table stakes. It's for visibility. It's no longer a luxury item. You're not going to say, we're not like that. We're not that office that's that, because they've got size and they've got scale and they've got people or whatever. Everyone is going to be that. And technology is really changing the landscape for that. So which is super cool, which I really enjoy. Now, next one. So we've done technology. The next one being the sophistication in things, which is really important, which is sophistication in strategy and sophistication in structure. Sophistication is not complexity, okay? Sophistication is the opposite of complexity almost, to a certain degree, in that you're trying to get it to do the simplest, most effective thing. So offices are evolving from this is the way that they're increasing their sophistication. They're moving away from execution and being more strategic, right? Being less reactive, more planning oriented. They're increasing their process and giving, ability to lean on written documentation, which for me is a very sophisticated thing and the big part of what Whole Road does, because what that allows you to is it allows you to lean on things when things get tough, which is always going to happen. There's going to be tough times, and being sophisticated means you can handle these tough times because you have process, because you have documentation. And I don't want to sound like it's bureaucratic. We're not talking reams of documentation here. We're not talking policy and all that sort of stuff. We're still family office. We're still flexible. We're still lean and all the rest of it, but we are still sophisticated, and sophistication needs process. Next one is going to be, another part of that sophistication is risk management. It's not just okay, so like a box ticking exercise here. It should be embedded in every decision that we're making here. What becomes easier is going to be once we understand what we're trying to do from a risk perspective, then it becomes more sophisticated. You get the right suppliers in place, you get the right operational structure, things like that. The next one on this sophistication level is you're increasing the balance between your generalists, so those that do a lot of different things and don't go too deep, they're broad rather than deep, specialists, which are deep rather than broad, and then outsourced partners, which can be a mixture of both, but tend to be relatively specialized as well. So that's you're increasing the balance there. So a more sophisticated office are going to be those that are seen as more desirable to work for, right? Because I don't know about you, but if I'm a generalist, and that tends to be the way I am, and if I'm in a meeting and it gets we're starting to dig right into the weeds here, especially on things like very complex investment philosophy or something like that, which I can handle to a certain degree, but then I will lean into expertise. That's an awesome thing to do, either at a counterpay level, like your manager or your wealth manager or whatever that looks like, or if there's an internal person, being able to have that balance between those that do a lot of things and those that do one thing or two things incredibly deeply. So I think this is really important. It also allows you, this increased balance also increases the ability to have, increased outsourcing to firms that, like wealth managers and stuff like that, which are really starting to look at family office services as a viable model. It used to be kind of, all over the place, but now they're going, no, this is our family office services person. And we can go, well, excellent, we've got a touch point there. Again, that increased sophistication means that we know where to go for different things. Flexibility, oh man, you've got to be flexible in a family office. You've got to be curious, you've got to be flexible. And I think that's what we're starting to allow. And that's what you've got to start to hire for as well, right? And also we're starting to get to the point where now geography is no longer the main constraint. So it really opens up this idea that we can hire from, we've got someone in New York, we've got someone in London, we've got someone in Sydney, we've got someone in Hong Kong, wherever, the Maldives, and we've got someone that's on the Amalfi Coast. It is quite amazing. Those really sophisticated offices where you sit on a Zoom call and you're like, oh my God, if you think about it, not a single person is in the same geography as the family office itself. And that's amazing because you really have to think about it, because ultimately everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's got their job. Everyone's trying to, produce the same outcome, which is the best for the office and things like that. But just because you sit in a different geography, the time zones can be a bit of a pain, but we're adults, we can work through that. This is what I'm saying. More sophisticated is going to be the continued change agent for family offices globally. The other thing that I find family offices continue to do is they're viewing investments or operations as a fixed product. Like this is what we do, which limits the innovation. The real question, I guess, is, are you solving for wealth preservation or long-term impact, or are you not? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So that's one of those other last sort of change agents there. So are you a train business or are you the transport business? So in conclusion, what we're looking at here, change is already here. As an office, are you responding to that change, or have you put your head in the sand a little bit and said, it's all too difficult? So are you reacting to it? So the agents of change, we've explored things like technology, sophistication, talent mobility, mindset, that train one. They're not on the horizon. They're here. This is where we're at. So they've already arrived across the globe. Family offices no longer just, what people used to call them, which was these quiet, anonymous capital hubs. They're becoming more dynamic, with purpose, with systems, with strategic intent, and they're becoming a desirable place to work, which is great. So this is what I've already started seeing in these ones. Technology adoption is accelerating, absolutely. Even sort of small offices are integrating platforms. Technology is becoming so integrated, interoperable, and AI, as much as I don't, everyone's kind of, actually, now that I think about it, most people are not talking about AI anymore because I think there's fatigue. So maybe this is the time to start talking about it again. I know I use it. I know a lot of family office use AI. to do a lot of that heavy lifting on the data and things like that. But, obviously I did that podcast episode, so just keep in mind all the things that we talked about there from a risk point of view. The other one we was already seeing is governance is maturing. I mean, I sit on investment committees. That's part of my job within, the family office space. A lot of the time is to sit as an independent member within the family office investment committee as a governance person, really. And there's a lot more people doing, a lot more officers going, we need that investment governance. We need that investment policy and purpose and things like that. So when I start with a new office, a lot of the time they have an intent to increase or improve their governance. And I love that because that's right in my wheelhouse. The other thing they're seeing is at the moment is talent is being, I guess, maybe redefined. So what the best officers are doing is they're blending that insourced, in-house, and then they're going outsourced expertise. You can just attract really good people with being thoughtful around the way you curate this. Like I help single family offices be established, right? The establishment of that. And it's just so great to get feedback from the principals and things like that. That is, if we're starting anew or we're reviewing how it's actually being done now, there's a real appetite for change if it's not working. Or if we're establishing a new office, to look at best practice. And what that best practice looks like is this hybrid model, I believe, attracting people who could work anywhere in the world and you can get them into your office. It's a fantastic place to be. So what happens for those that are not embracing change? Well, they're becoming fragile. We're starting to see turnover in staffing. We're starting to see people potentially not aligned to the way the office is going, and it creates operational investment risk. It's as simple as that. Turnover is not good. And getting trusted, good people and is incredibly difficult. So they become fragile. Most family offices are relatively lean. So if you've got unhappy or concerned or just, potentially confused staff and suppliers, then that can be really, really difficult and it reduces that robustness. The other thing they do is sort of lose relevance in terms of the operations. Like, what are we here for? Families start to question the value of the office. There's this, if it's not moving with the times, if it's not embracing these change agents, it will become less relevant. Especially with the next generation coming through and looking at it and going, well, is this for us? And then they might just deviate from it, which is, the worst part about it, because these are offices set up for intergenerational transfer a lot of the time. So, they lose relevance. And the last thing is they tend to get disrupted, which is what we don't want. Things like sudden wealth events, failed investments, conflict, personal conflict, a lot of the time, things like that can create cracks in the office. And without this scaffolding, which I love that term, and there's a whole podcast episode on it, without scaffolding, things collapse. So that support network, those agents of change, getting that in place is such an important thing. So just as maybe as a final thought, if you're at a family office, a lot of the time you could define it as being in the business of stewardship, right? And longevity. And to a certain degree, I guess, adaptability, because you're going from generation to generation. And that means you build for change, not just managing the status quo. So that's it for the episode. Hopefully it was of interest. If it was, make sure you set the alert on the podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, whatever. If you're looking for more family office insights, be sure to join, now thousands of people that subscribe to the Family Office Sherpa newsletter. You can find that on the front page at hallroad.com.au. That's HALLROAD.com.au. That's been going for 6 years. So it's been, it's built up a relatively good engaged audience, which I find really, really fun. If you're looking for assistance in establishing or managing a family office, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, always get back to you on that one. Or you can email me directly, Shaun, so SHAUN, @hallroad.com.au. Otherwise, thanks for listening.